good afternoon everyone. So I'm going to talk about a new programming language that we have been developing to address specific needs of microservices architecture and cloud native architectures. So I'll quickly go through some of the motivations behind building a new programming language. So if you look at most of the application development, modern application development, so we started with monolithic systems, but then now with the increasing customer demands, we have to make our applications disaggregated, and microservices architecture is actually a result of that, right? So you can't live with monolithic applications anymore, and you have to disaggregate all the complex systems into smaller applications. So with this disaggregation, what has happened was you have introduced so many endpoints into your software development ecosystem. That means endpointing includes things like data, functions, API, SaaS applications. So likewise, application that you are developing as part of your microservices architecture or cloud native architecture is supposed to talk to multiple and numerous such endpoints. So the technologies that you have in hand, so for example, if you look at any of the cloud native application that you are developing, is kind of integrating existing endpoints and creating some business application out of that. So the technologies that you have to implement these kind of microservices integrations or cloud native applications, so in one side you have the conventional integration solutions, right? Things like Apache Camel or Mule or any other integration solutions. And on the other side you have general purpose programming languages like Java, Node, or Spring Boot. So likewise, these are like two different aspects of implementing microservices integration. So if you look at both of these languages, we can identify an integration gap. Integration gap in the sense there are things that are there in integration products, things like DSLs which are not really agile. So if, for example, if you are using something like a Camel DSL, you cannot really do CI/CD or unit testing. So there are like a lot of limitations that you can find in that approach. And at the same time, if you are using general purpose language like Java, even Spring Boot, you have to write quite a lot of code to make your network integration calls, like make your services integrated together. So we are trying to address the address that particular problem by creating a language that is designed for integrating microservices. I'm not going to go through the entire presentation, but I will quickly show you some of the capabilities of Ballerina. So in Ballerina we have built a programming language from scratch, which has different capabilities. For example, if you go to ballerina.io, you can find different examples. So here what you can see is a service. So Ballerina, you can create services, right? Microservices out of Ballerina language using this particular syntax, and it has different capabilities such as database integration built into the language. So what we have done was, so we identified what are the network abstractions that should be part of a language that can be used for microservices. So we identified things like a service, a set of resources that you have in a service, then inbound endpoints and outbound endpoints, and how you can apply circuit breaker as part of your logic, right? Rather using an external library like Hystrix, and how you can use database connectors, how you can use connectors like Redis, Kafka. So everything is built into the language, and also we develop the entire ecosystem around the language. We have IDE plugins, central repository called Ballerina Central, where you can deploy and pull your packages. So I'll quickly go through a small demo, short demo on Ballerina. So you can download Ballerina from ballerina.io. It's a completely 100% open source programming language, and we inspire this. So when it comes to integrating different microservices, so we inspire a lot of concept from sequence diagram metaphor, right? In sequence diagram, you represent multiple interactions in a single diagram so that you can easily understand. So we inspire those concepts into the language. So we define something like a worker and set of external connectors as actors. So I'll go through when I show some of the examples. So now I am using the VS Code plugin for Ballerina. So we have plugins for VS Code, IntelliJ IDEA, Atom, and some other popular IDEs. So let me create a simple HTTP service, like a echo service or a hello world service using Ballerina. So let me create a service. So you can see that you have auto completion. Now I am going to use HTTP as my inbound interface. So I have to use import HTTP library into my project, and then I can use HTTP, right? And now I am going to use hello as my service name, and resource as just say hi. And now I have created a resource. Now I have to bind that my service to a particular inbound HTTP interface, right? So you can do that. Either you can create a endpoint at the top, like an inbound endpoint, and you can define what is the HTTP port that you are exposing, and what are the, if you are using a HTTPS, you can give certificate stores, etc. But also you can by default you can bind this to a particular port, let's say 9090, right? All right. So now I have the request. So now I want to send a response back to my caller client. So I'll create a HTTP response. And so as part of the response, I am going to set something like hello CloudCamp, and so now I have a response. I need to send it back to the caller endpoint. So respond with the response, right? And also one of the design decisions that we have taken as part of Ballerina is you make programming more resilient. So we basically enforce all the error handling, and programmer has to take care of all the error handling. And in this case, there can be errors that happen from this particular invocation. Either programmer has to ignore it using this particular syntax, or he has to handle the error. And there are other things like taint checking, various other security related stuff which are baked into the language. All right. So this is a simple hello world example. I have downloaded Ballerina and set the Ballerina home directory so that I can run Ballerina build or run command. I can run Ballerina run cloudcamp.bal. So it's starting up the service. Okay, now I can simply send a, so by default this service name and the resource name becomes the path and the resource name. So I can send a request to hello and hi. Okay. So it's a very simple example, but so likewise you can extend Ballerina into different use cases. Let me show you. I'm not going to try out everything here. So you can decorate this example with resource names, like you can put base path into your service, and you can use HTTP annotations on top of your service, like base path and resource. Again, you can have resource configuration, and you can extend this to, so we have things like Twitter connector, Kafka connector, gRPC connector. Likewise, there are multiple connectors available as part of the Ballerina ecosystem. So in this case, this example has Twitter endpoint, Twitter connector endpoint, and I have configured the Twitter endpoint at the top, so that you don't have to write any specific Twitter specific code, like all the API invocation details of Twitter API invocation details are hidden, and all the abstractions are provided to the developer. So basically, developer has to create a Twitter endpoint and configure the client ID secret, etc., and simply do a Twitter.tweet with the payload. And also we have capabilities to like native JSON support as part of the language. So you can see JSON is a type which is built into the language itself. So this is JSON type, and this is how we set up like a simple JSON message back to the caller. And the other coolest thing is you can annotate a given service so that it will generate your Kubernetes artifacts, right. You can in this particular service, I have put annotations for Kubernetes service deployment, and this will basically generate the artifacts out of the service. For example, suppose that I have a service, let us say here I am showing you the IntelliJ IDEA plugin. Let me make it bigger. So here we have service annotation on top of your service and deployment, and it will create a Docker image as well as Kubernetes artifact for your service. So I simply have to do Ballerina build, so when I do a Ballerina build, it will create the Docker image and the Kubernetes artifacts, right. So I can just show you the generated artifacts. So this is your Kubernetes artifact, which can be directly deployed into Kubernetes. So I will stop from that point onwards, but you can learn more about Ballerina in ballerina.io. So we have numerous examples available in ballerina.io, as well as different guides. And if you look at one of these guides, you can see every aspect of microservices development is covered in most of these guides. Like you can start with the designing of the scenario, as well as the then the development, and then you go into the deploying into Docker or Kubernetes, and other cross-cutting concerns like observability, how to use so things like tracing, matrix, everything is built into the language. So and also we have our own testing mechanism called Test Arena. So I think I don't have time to cover everything in this session, but I would encourage you to give it a try on Ballerina.
Okay, great. Thanks. Do we have any questions? Is there applause? Do we have any questions? Okay, question over there.
I'm sorry if I missed it, but I was just wondering what companies are behind the project.
Yeah. So actually, so I'm from WSO2. WSO2 is behind Ballerina. So WSO2 has been working on the integration space for more than like 12 years now. So Ballerina is kind of a output of all our experience on integration space, and the main authors behind Ballerina language, they were like involved in WSDL and all the other web services related specifications. Yeah.
I just saw a blog post on running Ballerina in a Node.js wrapper on a Lambda function. What are the advantages, disadvantages of doing that versus
Sorry, can you repeat the question again?
what are the advantages or disadvantages of using Ballerina in a Lambda function in a Node wrapper, JavaScript wrapper, versus just using a JavaScript function in Lambda natively?
I would say Ballerina has all the network integration related abstractions built into the language. So when you are using something like a node, you need to use whatever the libraries that we have, and whatever the code that you are writing is not really designed for doing network interactions. So that we have seen with most of the other languages. Even things like circuit breaking, you have to bring in some external library, and the code that you are writing is really messy in most cases.
I object to that statement. I mean, okay, hold on, let me give you a mic.
Sorry.
Sorry, I didn't have enough lunch. But like, so for instance, if you look at, say, string files, right, that you just put annotations on each of the methods that you wanted executed in a circuit breaking. Right? And so it's actually quite clean. And then sort of more generally, I mean, to me, the fascinating thing is, like, you're very focused on integration. Yet, from my perspective, a well-designed microservice, at its core, it actually has a substantial amount of business logic, right? Like, it's domain logic, and then this integration is on the periphery of it. And so sort of starting from the point of view of, well, we need a programming language to do integration, is almost like the integration tail, like wagging the business logic dog. And it sort of disturbs me. I'm not comfortable with that.
Yeah. So I think, so there were a lot of discussions on microservices on how to split the business logic from integration. Like even the service meshes, we are trying to kind of have separation between network calls and business logic. But I guess in most of the applications that we develop, integration logic is actually part of the business logic, right? So you are whatever the service that you are invoking, you need to have full control. Even things like now with service meshes, you are offloading circuit breaking into the mesh. But in some cases, circuit breaking can be part of your business logic, right? So for example, this particular service, I need to invoke maybe retry like 3 times, which is like a business level decision. So that's why. So there's no clear separation, in my opinion, between the integration logic and the business logic. And again, Ballerina is well suited for building the business logic. Like I show you the JSON, native JSON support, like transformation, native XML support, built-in XML and JSON types. So whatever the data that you are dealing with, you will be using those types to create your business logic, right? When you are using like language like Java, you have to depend on tons of external libraries, and those are not part of the language. So, yeah.
Okay. Any last questions? Okay, all right. Well, thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, Dave.
All right, thank you very much.
Yeah.